Good morning. So, so this being this closest Sunday to Earth Day, I thought it would be a good day to celebrate it with a Earth Day talk. And this is very kind of a topic that's very dear to me because of what I feel is a very intimate and close connection to the earth, to the natural world that I kind of grew up with and continue to be part of in different parts of my life. That it seems that who I am as a person is almost inseparable from what the earth is, what the natural world is. And the representative little story that I like for that is when I was going to college at Central Valley in California, in the town of Davis. They had some magnificent oak trees in the courtyards of the campus. Old, massive, majestic oak trees. And somehow they had survived from being cutting down. And I think there was a time when these massive, great, majestic oak trees were spread out across the valley. The earliest records of Europeans coming to the peninsula, which was Admiral Vancouver in something like 1780 or something. No, yeah, I think something like that. He describes that there was like an English park along from here, right literally where we are, with massive oak trees, and I think he came in the spring, so grasslands. And so in Davis, on the campus, they have some of these big oak trees. And I was studying botany. I took a botany class. And in the beginning of that quarter, they talked about the cycle of oxygen and carbon dioxide and how it, we breathe out carbon dioxide, the trees breathe that in and convert it through to oxygen, and that the oxygen that we breathe is coming from the plants around us. And so I was quite absorbed in this whole biochemical description of how this works on the big blackboard in the very big campus hall. And so I probably got somewhat, absorbed in that topic, and mind got kind of quiet. And the class was over, and I walked out, and came into the courtyard stunned. As I stood there, I kind of froze in my tracks and looked at these majestic oak trees. And the thoughts that went through my mind was, I need these trees to produce oxygen for me, the plants, not just the trees, of course, but more than I need both my kidneys. There's parts of my body I don't need as much as some kind of thing outside of me that's producing the oxygen. And so I had this question: where do I start? Where do I end? Where does a tree start? Where does a tree end? I mean, who are we? If I need the tree more than I need my left kidney or something, where do I begin? Where do I end? What is this connection? And I remember my mind got so still and quiet, and a feeling of a kind of vast, kind of sacred space, just being with these massive oak trees. And now this is the third year I'm going to do a pilgrimage in Marin County. It's a walking pilgrimage tonight, this time about 5-6 days. We're going to leave the Spirit Rock Meditation Center and walk over the Marin Headlands, over Mount Tam. And some of the places we go have old growth forests, old growth redwood forests. And maybe you've been there. We go to Muir Woods early in the morning before everyone comes. And it's very, very quiet there and peaceful. And these trees are magnificent. And for me, maybe for a fair amount of people get quiet being there in those groves. And in fact, one of the groves is called a cathedral grove. So the sense of the sacredness, the specialness of it, and the reverence that's there. there's a kind of, maybe a kind of healthy humility that comes with being a human being in the presence of these massive ancient trees, some of them probably easily 1,000 years old, if not more. And and um, and it kind of, for me, it changes my relationship with all these places of me and the world. I feel like now I'm in a reverent relationship to the natural world, to the world. I feel like I don't feel like I'm dominating someone who's going to dominate the world. I feel I'm a small little member of this family of life on this planet, and feel a kind of uh, I feel more alive in this humbleness or reverence in the relationship to these groves than I do watching Netflix, surfing the web or something, working on my computer. And I've reflected one of these pilgrimages about the native people of that area when there were a time before they were logged, things were cut down, freeways put in, that I think there were many places that had this massive trees and redwoods, and you walk along the coast there, it's spectacular, the Marin coastline, and I'm sure that there was plenty of situations where there was a very different relationship for who we are in relationship to the natural world by having it that way. Imagine, I've imagined myself here on the peninsula before there were any of these square buildings that we have here now. And what it would be like, what it would have been like walking 300 years ago, 400 years ago, here in the peninsula, and with these great, massive oak trees. There was one on Pulgas, one of the streets here nearby, a massive old one. And when the city decided it needed to be cut down because it was in danger of falling, and it was relatively close to a school and falling on cars or whatever, there was all these people protested and they tried to stop it, but they no success. And so then they did the ceremony around the tree, and all these kids stuff that they put. Kids, local neighborhood kids came and kind of honored the tree and said goodbye to it. And so this way in which our relationship to the natural world can shift and change depending how we're in touch with it, what we live in it, and how we participate in it. So this pilgrimage that we do, it changes my relationship to the land by spending 5 days walking across it. And we walk usually in the morning in silence. We do some ceremony as we go along. And so the sense of being this greater humility, and then for me, kind of a renewed promise I make to try to walk on this world gently, try to walk on this world without having such a big impact on it. The Buddha, when he was enlightened, before he was enlightened, and we have in the statue, the statue depicts the moment. If you see his right hand drapes over his knee, and it's him reaching forward to touch the earth. And as was the custom back then, but in what had now for me it becomes a phenomenally powerful symbolic value. The Buddha, the stories say, was born under a tree outdoors. He was enlightened outdoors under a tree. His first teachings were done outdoors under a tree. He died outdoors, laying on the ground between two trees. They say the trees were flowering, so it was kind of a special time. And on the night of his awakening, they say that this kind of particular evil trickster kind of character showed up called Mara to try to prevent him from becoming enlightened, and 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 came to him and said, "You don't deserve to be enlightened. Who do you think you are to do that? I mean, isn't this, you're not worthy of this." And so the Buddha didn't reply directly, exactly, but what he did was he put his hand and touched the earth touching gesture, and called upon the earth to be his witness for his right to be awakened, to be free, now no longer caught in the traps that Mara, the tempter, was setting up to trap him in. And the primary thing that Mara, how traps people, is with sensual desires. Occasionally, probably you've been caught by that. And so the last thing Mara wants is someone who escapes his realm of sensual desire. So he really wanted to stop the Buddha. And so the Buddha touched the earth. And they say the earth then had shook, bearing witness of all the compassionate things the Buddha had done through his many lifetimes, all his practices he'd done, that yes, he was worthy of it. And I love this, that we call on nature to witness. We call on the earth to be our witness. So if you're meditating or if you're walking on the earth, what is the earth? What can the earth be a witness for you? What does the earth say about you? What is it there to show you about yourself? And I'll leave that question now for now, but hanging there. But one of the things is that we live on the earth, and it's so easy to forget it. We live with the earth, and in the case of the Buddha touching the earth, it had this idea that there was the earth goddess. So Mother Earth, some people like to say historically, nowadays maybe the parent earth. But this kind of parental, the source of life that the earth has been for all of us. And it wasn't so many years ago, in the scale of time, that apparently there was no life on this earth. There's been more period of time with no life on this earth than there has been life on this earth. So, and then if we think about how long humans have been on this earth, it's a much shorter period of time. And I've read, I don't know the latest research on this, but I read some time ago some idea when they do genetic testings of human beings, and now they can kind of look back in time through the genetic evidence that survives. They think that all humans are descended from a small group of people, tribe. There were probably just a few hundred large, somewhere on the plains of Africa at some time, a few thousand, 100,000 years ago or something. And I love this idea that we all have common ancestors. It makes us all kin, it makes us all family. And to call on that we're all family in some ways. We all have shared ancestors. If we could trace it back, we would be able to all walk up maybe to the same little group of people and say, "Hi, I'm the result of what you started. Thank you for my life." And we'd all kind of be gathering around the same group of people to thank them, maybe. There's a story that's told in the Jataka tales that also goes back many, many millennia, thousands, 100,000, millions of years, billions of years, which tells stories of the Buddha in his previous life before he was the Buddha. And some of these are like Aesop's fables. And the fable here is that of the Buddha was a deer. He was the king of a herd of deer, very large herd of deer, and he was called the Banyan king, the banyan deer. Banyan being the Bodhi tree. And the story goes that there was a new king in the land, and this king loved to hunt. And so he took the royal forest, a very large forest, that had lots and lots of herds of deer. And he put a large fence around all of it to keep them all there. And then once a day, he wanted to go hunting. He wanted to kill one deer a day so he could have food and so he can kind of enjoy his sport of hunting. But his hunting that way, he would come with his entourage and soldiers and elephants, and it was a big to-do when he came hunting. And the deer would get afraid, and they would start rushing off and all this way and that way to get away. But they were trapped inside this large area. And so it made them panic even more. And so he was successful in, killing one deer a day. But a lot of deer got injured in the process. They would trip over each other, trip over logs. They, those who had antlers would run into people, others, stab them and things. So it was kind of a mess. And so one day the king of the Banyan, after the king had hunted one of the deer, went up to the king and said, "Excuse me, sir. You have to realize what you're doing here. You're injuring a lot of the deer. You're harming them. More are dying than need to die because the way you're doing this hunting. And I'm here to ask you to please try to do an act of harm reduction." And he wasn't asking him not to kill, because maybe that was asking too much, but intermediate was to ask for harm reduction. And the harm reduction was, we will provide you with, what it's called, we'll choose someone who have a lottery, or what do you call where, not a lottery, but what do you call when you pull straw? And what? Letter?
Choosing lots.
Yeah, choose anybody. People see who has to present themselves to the king to be killed every day, and that'll won't create all this other harm, the people running and trying to chase the runaway. And so that's what they did, and these compassionate deer who wanted to prevent so much harm being done were willing to sacrifice their lives for the greater good, in a sense. Then one day, it came upon a pregnant doe to be the one to offer herself for sacrifice. But she was pregnant, so she went to the king and said, "Please, can I not do it until after my doe is born?" And but the king said, "Well, I can't really ask someone else to do it in your stead, but don't worry, you don't have to do it." And so when the king came to hunt that day, the king offered himself in order to save the doe and the pregnant child. And but the king, the king deer, was kind of very majestic, very had a strong presence, and stood there in all his dignity, ready to be killed. But this got the king's attention. And the king said, "I can't kill another king, in this kind of majesty." And so he said, "What are you doing here?" And the deer said to the king the story about the pregnant doe, and that he was taking her place, so to save the doe and the child. And the king was so moved by the compassion, the care, and the sacrifice that the deer king was willing to make, that this changed his heart dramatically. And he said, "Okay, from now on, I'm going to stop killing any of the deer." And the king deer said, "Dear king, that's not enough. can you make a vow not to kill any animals? And the king said yes. So in that realm, from then on, no animals were ever killed. So it's a fable. And and it said, or I'll say, that when the moment the king said, promised yes, he would no longer kill any animals, that's when the forest started to heal itself. We've harmed so many places in our world, in the natural world. When are they going to heal? Some of them maybe never will heal. When I was in high school, I went to hear a talk by Richard Leakey. Some of you might remember him. He was one of the first, not first, but a really important anthropologist of ancient humans. And I think he was found at the time, remains of the oldest human in Africa, the skull of an oldest human. And so that was a big deal. So he knew a lot about, how evolution and, and he, in this big auditorium, explained that what he had seen is that a species that over-specialize die out. And he used the example of some great, what do they call those elephants with big tusks that woolly mammoths. Apparently their tusks got so big they couldn't function very well anymore, defend themselves very well. And so then they were easy to hunt. And so they died out because they over-specialized in this big. So he was saying that this was 1960s, late 60s, that if we over-specialized as humans, that we were going to have the same fate. But in some ways we already have. We've had civilizations come and go over the millennia. And I saw some of that growing up in Europe. I grew up one of the places I grew up was in the Adriatic coast. And in my eyes, there were some really beautiful islands that we would visit and go vacation on. We would go sailing sometimes along these islands. And part of what their beauty was their starkness of just being rock. But they weren't always just rock. Had been a time when they were filled with olive and grape orchards. And you could still find back then in the 60s, if we went diving into the water in these little bays, you could find clay vases that had fallen over the boats. And find a lot of pottery shards left over from that time. And when the Roman ships came to get the olives and the grapes or the grape juice, whatever they made wine. And then they over-farmed. And all the soil washed away. And so islands can no longer bear a lot of vegetation because all the soil washed away. And so the people who were surviving and lived off the land had to move because they could no longer survive. And that's happened to whole civilizations in Mesopotamia, where they over-farmed, overused the water, and then the civilization collapsed. So it's what Richard Leakey said: if you over-specialize, do too much, things collapse. And I grew up partly also in Los Angeles in the 60s, and I remember still very well the amazing amount of smog that LA used to have back then. And we would get sore throats just by breathing the air back then, and runny eyes. And I remember sometimes flying back to Los Angeles from being in Europe and going out of the airplane, and the smell of this thick smog was quite something. And the direction it was going, I don't know if anybody would have survived in Los Angeles. But that's one of the relatively good stories of cleaning the air. And the catalytic converters, all kinds of things happened that cleaned up the air enough so it's not as bad as it used to be. I don't think people get sore throats anymore in LA from the smog. So what kind of harm reduction do we do? can we do? Are we the king who goes around killing the metaphoric deer by how we live in our lives? How much dies? How much is killed? How much is killed and destroyed inadvertently by the lifestyles that we have? And how many, there's a spillover. What's the equivalent of the king hunting and then the secondary effect of all the other deer dying? What happens to us? What do we do here? What are we destroying? So one of the kind of dramatic, I think, very clear teachings of the Buddha is that he distinguished between the natural world and, he didn't use this word, but the synthetic world. He made a very strong distinction between the natural world and the humanly constructed world. What we can build and make and think that doesn't exist in the natural world itself. It's not natural in the sense that it's not produced by the natural world, and it doesn't have doesn't participate in the natural process of regeneration, of self-healing. It doesn't self-replication, and I saw that when I went to Spirit Rock last week. A little bit representing it for me was it's so great to be at Spirit Rock, this meditation center in Marin County, where it's designed to be outdoors anytime you go between different buildings there. And you really feel like you're on the land in a nice way. And I've been there, going there for over 35 years now, even before there were any buildings there. And in about 1993, the person who started IMC, before I got involved in IMC, a man named Howard Noodleman, who started it, him and his wife, Ingrid, in 1986 in Menlo Park. And then when I got here, had moved to Palo Alto. He died, and he had been president of the Spirit Rock board. And so when he died, we went and bought 3 oak trees and planted them near Sir Francis Drake Boulevard as you go into Spirit Rock in his honor. Well, those 3 trees are still there, and they just look like they're more grand every year I go to Spirit Rock. They're growing, developing, and now they've been, over 30 years they've been growing there. In 1998, they opened the big residential meditation hall, which, 27 years ago was shiny new. I remember what it was like. It was like, wow. This time when I was there, I looked around, wow, it's aging. It's beginning to rot the wood in the side of the building and rust here and there, and probably, this is not gonna last so well for another 27 years. But those trees are doing just great. We build things that don't exist in the natural world and don't participate in the natural process of life because they don't replicate, they don't reproduce, they're not. And some of those things that we create that are not natural, the synthetic things, cause a lot of harm. And so now we have all these microplastics that we're finding deeply embedded in our body, in our brain, that they end up. And I think I read this last couple of days that they're finding something in the fallopian tubes. It's not going to be long before we find microplastics in the embryos. Is that what we want to have in our life? And so we have to be very careful about the synthetic world that we're creating and the forever chemicals. So the Buddha had this, he didn't know about all the things that we create synthetically now, but he made a very clear distinction between what's constructed, and in his mind it was really the things we construct in the mind that don't exist in the natural world. A lot of the concepts, ideas, and that we live in, ideas about me, myself, and mine, greed, hate, and delusion, that we construct on that, these constructions, these ideas, these worlds that we move into, that our fantasies create, can create so much harm. And the Buddha kept pointing us back to the natural world in ourselves. And he used metaphors of the natural world outside as a representation of how the natural world works, so we can find it in ourselves. And I think the most dramatic use of this kinds of metaphors, that using part of the natural world that's in us to represent the natural world that's in us, in terms of spiritual practice in life, was he referred to something something profound within us that arises from something that he called the yoni. The yoni is the source of life. For humans, it means the womb. The profound attention, profound contemplation, the profound engagement with life that's womb-like, coming from this deep place within. It's a generative place. The Buddha talked about spiritual life as a life we're growing. And I want to say something I've said now a few times. In English Buddhism, we use the word practice a lot to describe what we do. We practice meditation, for example. And a lot of people who practice meditation, so the common question in the Buddhist circles in the West is, what is your practice? And then people usually reply with a technique. I practice mindfulness, I practice loving kindness, I practice Zen, I practice this and that. And that's nice, but it's usually describing it by technique. The ancient, from the time of the Buddha, the equivalent word to the word practice that kind of fits in the same kind of context, that word, what it means is to grow, to cultivate, to develop something, but it can mean to grow. So what happens if you were asked not what are you practicing, but instead you're asked, what are you growing? What would you answer then? If you say what you're practicing, I think it's easy to say, well, I'm practicing something else. You're practicing that, I'm practicing this, and I'm practicing the better thing. But what are you growing? Now we're talking about the natural world within, and something we all have. We all have inner growth. We all have this natural world inside that can grow. We all are nature. It's hard to imagine that they'll ever have a human being who's not born in a womb. Will they ever be able to incubate or gestate in a lab a human being? Is that possible? I hope not. It's amazing what our natural world is like, that which is within us. The natural world within us that can think, that can feel, that can heal to some degree, that can replicate, all kinds of things, that arose out of this earth, came from this earth, that is part of the earth's natural processes. We share in this in a profound way. That makes us kin, makes us family with all life on this planet. It's not just like, the earth, is all the things we see in the natural world, and not just decoration for our pleasure. It's participating. It's a participatory natural world that we participate in. It participates in us. It provides us with oxygen. It provides us with food. It provides us with so much in order to be able to live. We need the natural world. And we then, our naturalness has a chance to grow. And for the Buddha, we're learning to tap into, to support, to generate, to care for, to preserve the natural world in ourselves, so we don't get caught up in the constructed synthetic world that humans have been very clever in creating over these last centuries. The Buddha also saw the constructed world of ideas of self and ideas of status, ideas of dominance, ideas of right and wrong and good and bad, that they're causing so much harm in this world. So the idea we're all kin, we all belong to this world. And what the redwood trees remember, what the deer remember, we need to remember, reconnect to that, how much we're part of this natural world, how the earth cares for us. And if the earth cares for us, shouldn't we care for it? Can we walk on this world lightly? And what would that look like? At least in terms of harm reduction. The idea of stopping causing harm might not be natural. Just as I saw at Spirit Rock last week, there's a white egret has kind of taken up residence at Spirit Rock. And now it doesn't seem to be very afraid of people. You can't get too close, but you can get 10 feet away from it. And it's been there for about a year. And so it's kind of cool to see this white egret. They named it Paul. And but one day I was standing 10 feet away, and it was doing what it does, and suddenly it just kind of snapped at the ground, and in its bill was a lizard it had caught. And I was told there's very few lizards around Spirit Rock right now because of this one egret. And on one hand, at first I thought, wow, this is like an amazing natural thing to watch. But then I thought about the lizard. And I felt for the lizard. But, some of that, it's not going to stop. That's going to continue. But can we at least do harm reduction for ourselves? So we don't hold ourselves above nature, that we are nature. May we be like the king of the deer. May our compassion spread out into the world so that everyone is cared for, everyone's respected and valued. May we have forests that are sanctuaries, cathedrals, sacred places, that we go there to remember who we are in some deep way that we can't remember so well, so easily on the freeways in the Bay Area, in rush hour traffic. And perhaps this earth is not something to be saved. Maybe it's something to come home to. And if we come home to it and live with it as our home, then maybe it will save us. The natural process of this natural world, the regeneration, the self-healing of the natural world, has the ability to heal us, save us, if we allow it to, if we connect to it in such a way. And the earth, I think, will always continue. Maybe, life as we know it will be radically different. Maybe the human race will disappear. But for a long, the earth will be here. Life will probably be here in some form or other. So we're capable, but it looks like we know now, and since the 20th century, that we're quite capable of destroying this world as we know it. And if we do that, we destroy ourselves. But if we come home to this world and touch the earth, let the earth be the witness to our own naturalness, maybe the earth will save us. That's my hope on this Earth Care Week 2025. So thank you. And we have a few minutes, maybe. We can take 5 minutes. If anyone have any comments or questions you'd like to ask. Maybe that means you're all eager to go out to the Edgewood Park or and go out for, walk on the trails here in the peninsula. That would be nice to believe. Oh, it's Morgan.
I think so. Down like. Hi, my name is Morgan, and I wanted to just mention that there is a cemetery in Santa Cruz that for ecology they sell their redwood trees for burial. And so if you have loved ones that you want to have a family tree, you can buy a tree and you can bury them in the redwoods in Santa Cruz, and it'll be there for as long as redwoods last.
Great, thank you.
It's a beautiful,
I didn't
called
know.
a better forest. That's what it's called.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know there was such a thing in Santa Cruz, but there's a number of places now that have green burials where sometimes they plant trees as part of it, and we're going to maybe walk by it when we do the pilgrimage this year. It's in Tennessee Valley, in Marin County, there. So, thank you. May you love this earth.